Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeff, aka Son of Mar, on the PlayStation Network, and welcome to Dear PlayStation, the new topic-based talk show, if you will, some gameplay in the background, episodic series that we're going to start doing I think every Thursday, starting, well, this week. And so, what you might be wondering is, well, what exactly is the show going to be? The Dear PlayStation, what does that mean? Beyond, obviously, the PlayStation implications. What I'm going to do every week is essentially make a topic up or take topics from you guys, the community, whether you leave it through the comments or whatever, and I make an episode talking about the topic, my opinion on it, my view on it, along with what I hope kind of happens, along with what I like and don't like about the industry in terms of certain whatever the topic is. So without further ado, I want to talk about really early game, not early game releases, but early footage. It's something that we're starting to see happen to a lot of good games that end up getting way too hyped up because they get shown way too early. So they get way too much coverage and they get talked about way too much. The perfect example of that right now is No Man's Sky. It is the basic bully and the the scarecrow, if you will, the scapegoat for this syndrome, because No Man's Sky got shown off for the first time, I believe, 2 years ago. It was around the time that the PS4 got announced, and it was kind of, or at least it was officially announced a year and a half ago. I forget exactly the window that got shown off. What I'm trying to drive at is it got shown way too early. Way too early. And the reason why I believe that is because, obviously, not just everyone's opinion. I mean, I personally have not played No Man's Sky yet. But I have my own reasons. I don't really want to right now because I'm not in the vibe to play a Minecraft-like game. And No Man's Sky is a space version of Minecraft. Plus, I don't like the fact that a lot of the promises from Murray and from Hello Games, half of that content isn't actually in the game, but that's a whole other topic to get into, such as many different type of vehicles, some form of customization for your character, a little bit more of a vibrant ecosystem in terms of different type of aliens you can run into, more random events. There's a lot. You guys can look up the videos about why No Man's Sky sucks or whatever you want to put into the description. This video isn't supposed to bash No Man's Sky. I'm using it as an example of a game that, no matter which way you put it, it was going to fail on some level, I think. Because there are very few games that get announced like that and get that much coverage and that much attention and scrutiny and hype and live up to it. Very few games do that. Another game that's actually on its way out in October that I think everyone really needs to kind of monitor their excitement for is The Last Guardian. The Last Guardian is going to be a great game. I am very sure of that. And I think it's going to be a very successful follow-up, spiritual successor of sorts, in ways to Ico, or Ico, or whatever you want to pronounce it. And I don't think it's really going to harken anything in Shadow of the Colossus, which is fine. That's not a problem. I'm not that, Shadow of the Colossus is one of my favorite games of all time, but it doesn't mean that because The Last Guardian is going to be more like Eco, it won't make it a lesser game. What might make it a lesser game is people's expectations of it. My expectations going in is a solid game with a good foundation from its predecessors. And from what it seems like, it's got that. So in the very least, I'm expecting a solid experience and a solid game. That's why I think a lot of people that went into the Order 1886, they got let down because they expected more from it. I went into it with a very open mind, and I went in with basically understanding this is going to be a very okay shooter with a pretty cool story. And that's what I got out of it. And that's why, to this day, some people are still surprised that I say that the Order 1886 wasn't that bad. I actually found a lot of enjoyment in it, and I find many aspects of it good. I'll never say that's a great game or even a good game. It was an okay game for what it was, but it should have been better than what it was. I will say that. Same thing with Knack. Knack showed a lot of promise, had a lot of good qualities, should have been better than what it was, but I still think that it was a solid game as well. And Killzone was a good game, Shadowfall, but it also could have done a couple things better in its single player, I think. Multiplayer was actually really solid. I like this multiplayer a lot. But I'm getting on a tangent at the main crux I'm trying to drive at. When you announce a game way too early, you typically run into issues. Now, there are some games that avoid it because they're able to just like disappear. Uncharted, for instance. When Uncharted 4 was first announced, it ended up having to disappear for about a year and a half or a year or whatever before it got shown off again, or even really talked about on any kind of level because, granted, there were a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff in terms of Amy Hennig leaving and having issues with Naughty Dog, and Bruce Straley and Neil Druckmann taking over, the guys that made The Last of Us and wrote The Last of Us, taking over for Uncharted 4 and building that game up from a new direction. So that game was a little bit different, but at the same time, after being teaser trailed, it disappeared, and that's the thing. That was a smart move from Sony and Naughty Dog to kind of go, we need to fix this. We need to disappear and just fucking go away and ghost out. Some other games have done that. A good example right now for Sony at least would be the game called Wild. Wild, if I remember right, was originally shown and announced during Paris Games Week. And Wild is this really, really cool open world exploration adventure kind of game with action. And it's hard to describe, but essentially you play a shaman and you can like not mind control, but you can use this spirit telepathy to go into a bunch of different animals, such as a hawk, a bear. I think you can get a wolf, and you can get other animals too. And each one has their different abilities. And the main crux, from what I'm getting at, is you're supposed to basically heal this chief of your village. And so you go on basically a pilgrimage, at least the mission that was shown off, to heal this guy. Who knows what the actual full-blown story is going to be. But, nevertheless, it looks like an incredible game. And I recommend anyone that doesn't know anything about Wild to look it up. Wild on the PS4. Looks great. After it was shown off and talked about that during that segment, it's disappeared pretty much off the face of the earth ever since. And that's a good thing. Some people have been kind of like bringing it back up like, hey, where's Wild been? I haven't heard anything about Wild. What happened to Wild? Is Wild still in development? And it's one of those things where as a gamer, I understand, and trust me, I'm the same way. I get really hyped and excited about games. And on top of that, I get really hyped and excited about really cool looking games. And I hate it when they disappear, but it's necessary. Because in order for a game to get really good and to be developed properly, it has to basically go radio silent to get shit done. Uncharted 4 was a really good example of that. We didn't really see footage of it until probably about a year before it came out. Actual footage. And that was after all the behind the scenes stuff. A year later, it ended up coming out even after delays. Another good example would be Fallout 4. Fallout 4 was announced, shown off, and then it came out, 4 months later? So, Best set a new precedent when it comes to announcing games. They set a possible new idea for a lot of game developers, and I think Rockstar is doing that with the new Red Dead. They're going to possibly announce it, I think, at the Sony event that's happening on September 7th, where they're going to talk about the PlayStation Slim, what they're going to do with the base model PS4, and probably officially announce what the Neo is going to be, along with what their plans are for it, along with showing off more VR, and possibly Red Dead Redemption, and maybe even Agent, if that's still in the works, which I hope it is. But be that as it may, best to set a precedent with the idea for companies and studios to basically go, we don't need to announce a game a year or two out. We just don't. So you're starting to see, I truly believe you're going to start seeing studios start backing off and start announcing their games about a year away, or even 6 months away before release, because I think game studios are starting to understand that the more time you give a game in coverage, the more likely you're going to give that game a lot of scrutiny by game players. by gamers in the gaming community and journalists. You're going to give them a lot of room to basically just analyze everything. And the more footage you put out there, the more risk you put out. No Man's Sky is a good example of that, where there's footage on footage on footage on footage on footage of that game, and interviews with Sean Murray. And there's just so much of that, of him saying things that are just not in No Man's Sky that should have been in it because of what he said, right? Again, I can't help but reiterate that I'm not trying to bash No Man's Sky. I'm using No Man's Sky as the most recent point to give, that maybe we're at the point where we don't need to have game announcements and game footage shown off so much, right? And again, Fallout 4 is a great example of when a game puts the announcement and footage and everything so close to when it's coming out. And honestly, it worked extremely well, which then begs the question, well, how come more studios aren't doing that? How come EA didn't change their plans for how they are treating Battlefield 1 right now? Well, how come they didn't wait until E3 to officially announce it, right? Or even better yet, just wait till Paris Games Week, right? Or not Paris Games Week, but Gamescom or something. How come Gears of War isn't doing this? Blah blah blah. Maybe companies and studios are going to start taking this as notice going forward. But I'm taking speculation here. Who knows how all the other studios are going to pan out compared to what Bethesda did, because that was a very unique situation. But anyway, so where does this leave game announcements and games in general in terms of their development going forward? Well, for starters, there's a lot of games in development right now from PlayStation that are for many different platforms, and plenty of them we don't know when they're coming out. A good example would be God of War. God of War was shown off at the E3 press conference for E3 with no release date, but it's speculated to come out next year, at the end of next year. So it's been announced, hypothetically, about a year and some change before it probably comes out. The same thing could be said for Days Gone, and the same thing could be said for a number of other games, such as Dreams from a year ago, along with a few other games. And it's an interesting fact to watch when it comes to video game announcements, because I'm personally wondering when we're going to get to the point in time where we don't need these far out announcements. But you're also playing a very intriguing game, though, as well. Because with these announcements, you also have to do a balancing act of hyping gamers up enough and giving them enough of a window to get excited about the game, but not enough to get too crazy with details. So where is that fine line? Because while Fallout 4, it did extremely well, and the hype train was crazy for that game, at the same time, it was also a Fallout game, where Fallout 3 did extremely well and was really well received, and then Skyrim was even better. So then you had a huge following of Bethesda fans now waiting for the next release, and then it ended up being Fallout 4. A lot of people were disappointed with Fallout 4, but it ended up selling really well and doing really well. So I'm of the mind that certain games should wait a little longer and take more time to breathe. And I think those games are games that need to prove something almost. For instance, games that are new IPs, I think, definitely deserve, or maybe really old games that are coming back to form, deserve about a year to a year and a half worth of coverage, or at least a year and a half out from when it actually comes out, so that it can be shown off a couple times, right? God of War is a good example, along with Days Gone. Now, why do I believe that? The reason why is this. By that point, mathematically, you're probably going to have 2 to 3 showings of your game, with 3 different demos of new content. Because I'm guaranteeing that PlayStation Experience, we're probably going to get pretty similar demos of the God of War and Days Gone gameplays from E3, if I had to guess. I could be wrong. It'd be amazing if we got new content, but I don't think we will until next year's E3. And then we'll get a final demo probably probably at Paris Games Week next year, maybe, or maybe even a PlayStation event that they make. Who knows? And I'm just talking on my ass on what they might do. I don't know, but my point is that giving enough time for these new IPs or returning IPs from a long time breathing room, and also the chance to kind of impress people and to kind of give an idea of what their mechanics are, that gives enough of a period of time for people to kind of get their grasp on the game. Uncharted did the same thing. Uncharted added, the grappling hook. It added a whole new dynamic in terms of the relationships and a really interesting story. And on top of that, it also introduced mechanics from The Last of Us in terms of stealth mechanics, like actual stealth mechanics in terms of hiding in grass and stuff like that. And it showed really open maps with a lot more open combat areas. Whereas Fallout 4, and I'm not trying to bash Fallout 4, but Fallout 4 was pretty much more Fallout. It added the new settlement system, but that's really the biggest thing. Going into Fallout, you know what Fallout is, and just like the next Elder Scrolls can get away with a 3-month window in terms of showing off at E3, then come out 3-4 months later, because there won't be that much of a change up in terms of the game formula. Same thing with like Grand Theft Auto. You know what Grand Theft Auto is by this point. Same thing with Call of Duty. Same thing with Battlefield. They're the same kind of block that you can kind of put in its spot. It might have a different type of color, or it might have a little bit of group like changes here and there, but they're roughly about the same formula. And there's nothing wrong with that. The formula's tried and proven, especially for Call of Duty, but you don't have to, like I said, have this really long stretch for games like that. You can shorten it quite a bit for games like that, I think. Meanwhile, newer IPs do need that breathing room so that they can show off their stuff a little bit more. So, with this all in mind, and with all the rambling and well, maybe not ranting, but all the rambling I've said, where do we go from here, right? With game announcements, like what are going to be the big game announcements going forward, right? And how do I want them to announce them? So I want to talk about some games that I would either love to see announced, that are probably going to get announced, or that will definitely get announced, and kind of how they're going to get announced, right? So let's talk about, and this is all going to be for PlayStation, but I might bring up other consoles too, right? So let's talk about PlayStation first, yeah. I truly believe, because Rockstar has been quiet as the grave, that the Red Dead Redemption game, the new one, whatever it is going to get an official announcement at the September 7th PlayStation event that they're having. I think it's going to be one of like 2 or 3 games that are going to be at that event. The other 2 games, one of them, I'm not really sure what the third game will be, but I do think one of them is going to be probably, well, maybe not probably, but possibly Gran Turismo. And for some reason, I believe that could happen because I feel like that'd be a really good tech demo to show off like how powerful the Neo is. It'll show off the discrepancy, like it'll give a reason for people to get the Neo, especially with like how well it runs VR, right? Because that is going to be one of the premier games to get that's coming out around the time that Neo is coming out, right? Or in PlayStation VR. But at the same time, that's another argument itself. Do you want to show side-by-side clips, or do you just want to show the Neo footage, right? That I don't know. I don't know how I would want to personally handle that. I think it'd just be smart just to show off the Neo footage and just make sure everyone knows, like, hey, this is what looks like a Neo, and then later on show off, after the fact, like, hey, this is what it shows off in regular base model PS4 / the Slims, right? Again, I don't even know if that's the right move to do. It's this very murky water PlayStation's getting into, but then again, Xbox is going to run into that problem here soon too. So both systems are going to run into that problem. But either Gran Turismo or Uncharted 4, maybe even Uncharted 4 would be the better bet, because then people already know what it looks like, so showing off on the Neo won't be as big of a deal, I guess. But I do believe they're going to pick one of the big graphic, big mainstay titles to show off for the Neo. They're going to pick one game to show off for the Neo, right? And then I truly do believe Rockstar is going to be there and announce Red Dead Redemption. And it'd be really cool if they announce, like, hey, by the way, it's going to have like a 6-month exclusivity deal for the PlayStation 4, right? Like that'd be fucking sick. I doubt it, but it'd be kind of cool. It would harken back to the PlayStation 2 era. The last game, I don't really know. It'd be really, really cool to get two brand new announcements out of nowhere. One of them being a probable third-party game with maybe some type of timed exclusivity deal for the PlayStation. Then you show off a previous PlayStation 4 game that's already come out to show off the PlayStation 4 Neo, along with possibly its integration with how the theater works for the headset for VR. And lastly, the last game I think would be really good to show off another PS4 game that's coming out really soon that doesn't have a release date. So I think honestly the best game I could think of for that kind of window would be a game called what happened to Edith Finch? Edith Finch, the disappearance of Edith Finch, the vanishing of Edith Finch. I forget the exact specific title, but it's Edith Finch. And it's a horror 1800s kind of game from the makers of Unfinished Swan. And I feel really bad that I don't remember the name of it. It's from Giant Sparrow, and it's going to be probably a great game. Unfinished Swan was fantastic. I loved Unfinished Swan, and I'm going to have Kyle play it at some point. He needs to play it. It's a great game. It's a very intriguing game. And Edith Finch, from what I saw of it, looked really, really cool as well. But I haven't heard jack crap about it for a long time, and I'm really hoping it's still coming this year. It's supposed to, but who knows? So that all being said, I don't think they'll show more than 3 games at the PlayStation event. They'll probably just do an hour show. It'll probably be 45 or half an hour to 45 minutes on the actual hardware and talking about the hardware and talking about the future PlayStation, blah blah blah, right? And then the other 15 minutes will probably be game announcements of some sort. On top of that, there were rumors that there might be another Vita handheld, like a 2.0 Vita. I don't know if that'll happen. I do think there's a even larger hardcore community that would buy handhelds if they're good and really well supported and everything. Especially since there is a big subset, including myself, of Vita fans that would buy a Vita 2.0 in a heartbeat. If given a great lineup, I think there'd be a lot of people that buy it. That being said, Sony would have to take a really big risk doing that because balancing the projections for VR and taking the risk on VR, as well as taking a risk on handheld, along with trying to make the PS4 and PS4 Neo work and everything like that, and balancing your studios with doing VR games, PS4 games, and adding a handheld possibly, that'd be a lot of work. And that would mean that Sony would have to shell a lot more money, I think, to kind of get a lot of these second parties that made these really good Vita games. They're going to have to recontact them and get a lot of these Vita games off the ground. I think, so hypothetical, if the Vita 2.0 was made, they would have to contact Concept and get probably Soul Sacrifice 2 made, or at least put into development of some sort. Probably contact the guys that made Freedom Wars again, another Freedom Wars made. Probably get some other first parties to make some Vita games. Maybe an Infamous game finally. Maybe a Resistance game for the Vita. Along with a bunch of other stuff. They're probably definitely going to have, House Marquee make a game that's exclusive for it, along with a few other studios like that. Like, they might have Giant Sparrow do something, Sandlock will do something, Sony San Diego will do something, Cambridge might do something. There's a lot of studios that could do something and do something really, really well. But the thing is, again, you're going to stretch yourself really, 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 really thin. But, again, that also gives them the opportunity to revisit a lot of games and do a whole new, audience base with the Vita. They're the only company right now, I think, besides Nintendo, that could really make a really good run at a handheld and do well with it. I mean, Sony had, honestly, the Vita was an amazing handheld. It just came out a really bad time. And it wasn't as well supported initially as it should have been, but it was still a really, really great handheld. There have been rumors though that it might get announced at the PlayStation event. I don't know if that's true or not. I hope so. That'd be sweet. I would buy it in a heartbeat if it's got a good lineup, but who knows? I'm more excited about VR right now and getting probably the PlayStation Neo which is becoming more and more likely right now, coming out possibly next year, or in the very least the end of this year, in like November or October. And it might get like around the window of VR. We'll see. But I am excited about the PlayStation event a lot, very much so. And I'm looking forward to, you know, what Wild's gonna end up being when Detroit Almost Human's gonna get a release date announced. There are a lot of great games coming out next year. I'm looking forward to when God of War gets an announcement. You know, there are a lot of things that are coming up. But yeah, I'm really excited about the projection and the changing of the industry in terms of possibly, you know, this new format change for how studios approach and companies approach announcements of games. And I'm curious if the Fallout 4 method of announcing games is going to change anything. I'm curious if the PlayStation event is going to have a really good reception, if the Neo is going to get really well received. I'll say it now, if the Neo isn't that big of an upgrade, like if it's just a 4K version of the PlayStation 4, then I don't really see the point in getting one right now personally. I might get one eventually, but I might even just wait for the PS5. If it is a pretty good upgrade, like a pretty decent upgrade, which I am betting it is, because PlayStation's kind of scared, I think, of the Scorpio in terms of the amount of power that thing can put out, and how, you know, just in general how powerful that thing. I think they got blinded by it. So it'll be interesting to see how the Neo kind of responds to it. I'm not expecting it to try and be on par. I think they kind of already dug their hole in terms of doing a very traditional mid-generation jump, or not traditional, but doing almost like the iPhone route, where they do the iPhone and then the iPhone S, right? Where they do the model, then they do like a half measure jump, and then they're going to do the next model after that. Whereas the Scorpio is more of the Galaxy to the Galaxy 5 or whatever, right? So it's a pretty big jump. But even then, that has its own problems too. Because eventually they're gonna run into issues in terms of alienating their audience. Because I think after the first year of the Scorpio, I doubt they're gonna continue making Xbox One games, or the Xbox Scorpio games on the Xbox One. But who knows? It's gonna be a very interesting 2016, and you know, going forward, next year is gonna be awesome, and the end of this year is gonna be awesome, and that is the end of the first episode of Dear PlayStation with me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining. Hit the like button if you liked what you watched. Hit the sub button if you want to continue watching content just like this and be updated on it. Hit the comment board if you want to leave a comment. And as always, you guys have a great one, and I'll catch you guys later.